It gives me tremendous pleasure to welcome one of my oldest friends in this profession and an amazing researcher and scholar, Dave Dutta, to Virtual Summer School in Entrepreneurship Research today on our fifth day of classes. Professor Dave Dutta is at the University of New Hampshire. He did his PhD from Ivy Business School in Western University in Canada. His research is at the intersection of strategy, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And his specific focus is on innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems. And here's the part that never ceases to me about Dave. We talk about how we need to be engaged with practice, and Dave has consistently, over his a little more than 2 decade journey in academia, done that, as you can see from his certifications and his work as coach and consultant for entrepreneurial mindset profile, innovator mindset, design thinking, technology entrepreneurship. With that, please join me in welcoming Dave to our session today. Dave, welcome.
Sure. Thank you so much, Vishal. It's such an honor to be a part of this amazing initiative that you conceptualized. You are truly a visionary. You organized something like this when nothing like this existed specifically for entrepreneurship. And every year I hear such wonderful things about it, and I know that a lot of PhD students from all over the world come for this. So it must be such a significant step in their career as they become researchers and scholars. So thank you so much, Vishal, for the initiative. Yeah, indeed, we've been connected for more than 20 years now. I still remember we met first in 2003, and then we've stayed connected. And I warmly reciprocate the friendship that you mentioned, the thoughts about it. And I know we've worked together also in some papers, so it's been such an honor.
And Dave,
Thank you.
perhaps now that you say about 2003, and given that we met at a similar seminar, but in person, which back then used to be run by Scott Shane at Case Western University about entrepreneurship research, where the goal was to expose new people back then, like you and me, to entrepreneurship research. And of course, that's what these folks are doing now, and we can use Zoom to do it. Perhaps you can maybe take sort of 30 seconds or a minute to talk about what role do you think that seminar in entrepreneurship by Scott Shane played in your career? It's been more than 20 years. Do you think it was useful?
Absolutely. Those days, in most institutions where students should come for a PhD wanting to specialize in entrepreneurship, there were probably not any doctoral seminars on entrepreneurship in many universities. So this was our only way. Sort of, I kind of like you also, Vishal. Maybe we both sort of got inducted into entrepreneurship research projects by our professors at that time. So my baptism by the fire was also like that. I started with an entrepreneurship project, which in due time with Professor Stuart Thornhill, with due time we got a JBV, publication out of that. But I had not taken any formal doctoral courses on entrepreneurship, so I just happened to see this announcement about Shane's summer seminar, and I thought that this would be wonderful to go to. And so many of us got connected there, and especially I met you for the first time, and then our connection continued. We met at conferences, and then in due time we started working on papers. So it played a very important role for me personally, I think. Firstly, to understand about the theoretical backdrop to entrepreneurship, which I did not know before that, and get more connected with the literature, but also know that opportunity identification and development is such a core construct in our field. And then, of course, the networks and connections, especially with you, Vishal.
Thank you, Dave. And yeah, I share the same sentiment, which is it's amazing how that one week shaped the academic journey of so many of us. And some of those people are now editors at top journals, of course, full professors doing amazing work. And I always remind our participants that look around the room, these are the future editors and future top publishers of the field. And because that was our experience too, right?
Absolutely. And I think what you have conceptualized, Vishal, and you've been doing now, this is the sixth year of the virtual summer research program for entrepreneurship scholars. It's much bigger. It's even more flexible, I think, because people can connect from different parts of the world, which is such an enriching thing. Earlier, when we went for Scott Shane's seminar, only those that could travel to the US or were in the US, and could do that over the summer were able to go. And there are costs involved, there are visas involved, all of that. Right now, you can log in from anywhere and do this. So I think it is absolutely amazing, a fantastic forum. And then you can follow it up with, if you haven't met in person, I'm just speaking to the doctoral students, you can meet up at conferences and say, oh yeah, you were there at this, the summer workshop, and how here we are now connecting in person. And I loved your, ideas about that topic, and maybe there are possibilities for collaboration. So this has got like, what should I say? It's got a multiplier effect, I would say. So Vishal, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Dave, for your kind words. And yes, I didn't mean to take away from your presentation time, but
No,
I
sure,
thought,
no
yeah,
problem. Should I start with my few
yes,
slides
please,
then? Okay.
please.
Are you all able to see my slides?
Now we are, Dave. Thank you.
Okay, great. So just quickly go on to the next slide. So I kind of thought, what should I be talking about? And I know that Vishal's summer research conference for doctoral scholars gets so many accomplished, seminal scholars in our field to come and talk to you from one year to the next. So I kind of wanted to pattern it after my own experience, and I thought what would be the key themes that I should share with you. So I'm going to I have structured my presentation on these few points. First, I'll talk a little bit about my career trajectory. I'll talk then next about my current research focus. Then I'll speak a little bit about my learnings over 25 years as an academic. And then finally, I think which is very important is I'll highlight a few things about developing a writing practice. I'm sure you all practice writing already and must have your own strategies that work for you. But I'll just share from my perspective what I have seen in course of my journey, in terms of papers getting rejected time and again, papers finally being accepted, working as a reviewer, what I've noticed in other papers, and how I might have thought about them. Uh, Plus a lot of workshops that I attended with from senior scholars who shared their best practices and tips on writing, which I try to emulate as well. So, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. Now, this is a very packed slide, but you can see that I made a very late entry into academia. I came with 14 years of work as a strategy consultant and practitioner back in India after my engineering and my MBA. So that has its pros and cons. Like for me, it was a second career decision. Uh, I had to be very thoughtful about that. I was not going to go back to industry practice after that. I might do a little bit of executive education or maybe an isolated consulting project, but I was shifting my career, shifting the country, shifting my location, everything. At that time, I didn't know that once you come into academia from industry, your industry experience is not counted at all, in an official way. You can always bring those enriching experiences into the classroom and share them. And MBA students love that, especially. But then, you have to start from scratch or zero base, like you have at the bottom of the rung as an assistant professor. And I took nearly 6 years to finish my PhD. That is because I was too interested in too many topics, too many theoretical framings, too many types of methodological ways of doing things. And while that I think overall helped me in the long run, it kind of really had an impact, negative impact in terms of how quickly I could finish my thesis. So I took, instead of 4.5 years or 5 years, I took almost 6 years. But on hindsight, I feel that that was time well spent. So I just wanted to mention that. I have been with UNH. There are a couple of typos I can see on that point, but University of New Hampshire since 2007 when I graduated. So I've never really changed my job. I have received in several years and even now some information from headhunters that there's this position open. I have been tempted a few times to respond to some job ads, but finally, I've always, continued to stay in UNH with its strengths and weaknesses, uh, because I really like this part of the country and I love the balance that UNH has in terms of teaching and research and and the culture of my department and all of that. UNH is a Carnegie R1 institution, but we do not have a doctoral program in business, and that's a very important thing because you don't have talented PhD students like you to work with. So I have to forge my connections and reach out and look out for working on papers and collaborations. So I've done that. Uh, I have collaborated with over 40 co-authors from around the world, from a number of countries. And just before this meeting, I was in two meetings on for my current research projects. One with research scholar from Syria and Lebanon, and we are working on an interesting project together. And just after that, I was having my bi-weekly meeting on another research project with a Chinese scholar who's based in the UK. So, I continue to work with a number of people from around the world. And I did this as a very strategic kind of thing because, I don't have the PhD students to work with. Uh, I'm not supervising any dissertation. I have been a sort of, reviewer for some dissertations or examiners, but I've not supervised. So where do I get the latest talent and the ideas, that energy that PhD students bring? But the other side of this whole thing is also then I do not spend time, which is a lot of time and investment of time. Professors like Vishal do in mentoring their doctoral students and getting them through the finishing line. Don't have to do that. But our research requirements for getting promoted to assistant and then to from promoted from assistant to associate and then to full have been pretty stringent. So I had to sort of match up to those things, and I had to then look out for where can I do projects. I also wanted to mention that I have been kind of like we're quite involved in sort of going ahead with my educational journey even after my PhD, and that I think came off from my background of being a consultant, having been in a lot of self-development programs. Then my long PhD doctoral student stint when I took courses in sociology and other places, and learned about things. And these areas that I got interested in, be it education or liberal studies or writing, which I'm currently doing. Actually, doing an ongoing program on MFA in creative writing. All of these three are from University of New Hampshire. We have a great benefit that if you're an employee, then you can do these programs for free. I started with taking one or two classes in education because I wanted to improve my pedagogical aspects even more, because research and teaching both are important. Teaching is very important for our university. And then I saw that I have done quite a few courses. Why not then just apply formally for the master's degree? I got that. Then liberal studies came in because I'm very interested in ancient Indian philosophy, and I wanted to, engage in liberal studies because in my generation in India, if you are a good, so-called within quotes good student, then you had only two careers open for you: either go for medicine or go for engineering. So I missed out on liberal studies, and I wanted to. There was a hankering inside me that I need to know much more about all the humanities fields and liberal studies. So I did that, and finally I finished my MA in that. And the MFA in writing is because I'm interested in writing poetry. I've written a lot of poems, trying to get them published. It's very hard, as hard as publishing in an A-star journal, or maybe even harder. Most poems don't make it to literary journals at all. They are just rejected unless you want to go for self-publishing. But then that one is not treated as something like a feather in your cap. Like you can always pay money and self-publish. I don't want to do that. So I thought I should improve my craft of poetry. And then design thinking and all of that came up because I wanted to improve in my teaching further and bring in new ideas and thoughts into my classroom. So let's quickly look at my, evolving research trajectory. With Vishal, I worked on entrepreneurial orientation and learning. I worked with other co-authors on learning and knowledge-based partnerships. But all of that several years back somehow morphed into an expanded, research context of entrepreneurial ecosystems. And my last 5 years of work have been all in the area of entrepreneurial ecosystems. My current research projects are in the area of entrepreneurial ecosystems as well. I think entrepreneurial ecosystems is a sort of a hot topic right now in research, though there are some concerns about it too. Like, is it another name for things that we already know, like clusters or, constellations of firms operating in a location? But it is for sure one of the topics on which a lot of papers are being published now. And I think my co-authors and I kind of, took the opportunity at the right time, which was just before COVID. So I have several papers have been published on that. So in terms of entrepreneurial ecosystems, because of my penchant and real desire to engage with theory, I come from a range of perspectives. Learning knowledge and dynamic capabilities have been a long, interesting topic for me. I've also delved deeply on institutional theory and institutional logic. Some of those things come because of my interestingly enough, because of my other courses that I took during my PhD program. Like, I took courses in sociology and psychology and international relations, which were not required as part of the PhD, but I did some seminars, master's and doctoral seminars on that. There was a course on critical theory and constructivism. I took that. So some of those areas have generally been very interesting for me, and I've tried to build them further and keep reading about these things. So these are some of the recent theoretical frames I've used in my papers. And I feel like, which I will talk a little more, like, if I had to choose my position as a scholar, like, am I more of an empirical scholar or a methodologist, really having state-of-the-art methods at their fingertips and, dabbling in a lot of archival data and being able to find insights and patterns in the data? I'm not like that at all. I'm more toward the qualitative kind of thing, research methodology, which I understand to a reasonable extent, I would say. I don't consider myself even a master of qualitative research methods yet. If there's one area where I feel that I can contribute, that's building and positioning papers based on theory and sort of being able to tell a story more in an articulate way based on the findings we get. So most of my papers are where I contribute to the theory building, theory development a section of the paper. I've had several papers which we published together where my wonderful scholars have said, we find these interesting patterns in the data, but we are not able to tell what would be a good story around that, or what might be the theoretical framing we might anchor it on. And then I have gone ahead and further modified the front end of the paper that they already had, because of course you go from theory to actually to methods and then to the findings. They did that, but then the theory part had to be strengthened. So right now in entrepreneurial ecosystems, I am concerned about two aspects, which is what broadly defines what people are working on in research in entrepreneurial ecosystem. One is about the context itself, it's a bigger context, right? It's not just a single firm. It's not around its environment. It's not also a dyadic or groupings of firms, but it is like a location which has been expressly designated as an ecosystem, and firms are coming in there. Other ecosystem actors are coming there because they see some potential in that place, and they feel that they can have a win-win relationship. So there are aspects to this context which are very very promising, but at the same time also very challenging for individual actors to work around. So there can be a lot of good research on entrepreneurial context, understanding the context and explaining about the context. Second is, of course, the actors and their interaction, and there can be a lot of rich projects on that. And then finally, because we are all entrepreneurship scholars, one of our enduring focus is venture performance, and performance can be defined in multiple ways. So ultimately, how does all this help the firm to because they were present in an ecosystem, or does it help? Those are the questions we can ask. So in my current research projects, I see two broad areas. One is the continued focus on entrepreneurial ecosystems. And one of my projects is about like how in industry, these are ongoing papers. These are like early stage projects or working papers, you can say. I haven't published them yet, but I'm working with a number of co-authors on how an industry transforms into an ecosystem under the influence of digital technologies. And we are studying one context on that. Then I'm also getting interested in resource-constrained entrepreneurial ecosystem and how those ecosystems thrive or not thrive. There's a tacit understanding in ecosystems literature in entrepreneurship that these will provide benefits to companies and for entrepreneurs. But how about a resource-constrained ecosystem in Nepal, for instance, or in Bangladesh, where a lot of things are lacking? How do ecosystems not form there at all, or do they still form, but there is a different way of operating? Those are issues that I'm very interested in right now. A third area that I've got interested in is entrepreneurship and AI. I'm sure a lot of researchers here in this forum as well as elsewhere are working on that because entrepreneurs are embracing AI. So current couple of projects, we are trying to understand AI and entrepreneurial cognition. What is the kind of overlap between that? And the next one is like the impact of AI on entrepreneurial processes. Do the processes of entrepreneurial opportunity recognition and development that we currently understand, do these get modified or changed in some ways because of the impact of AI? And we know that AI is not static. It's rapidly developing on it. It has its own trajectory, building up so fast. So what kind of things might change in entrepreneurial processes because of that? So those are some areas I'm working on. I wanted to highlight this, especially because this really defines, like where I come from and how I work in my professional and personal relationships. So I've been taking a deep dive into this one of these ancient Indian philosophical traditions, which is called Advaita Vedanta. And I won't bore you with much details about it, except to distill a couple of core points, which I value very much and which kind of, that's how I present myself. So the fundamental belief in Advaita Vedanta is that each one of us reflects the universal super force. So we might be very different from each other. We might have very different trajectories. We might come from different geographical locations and cultures. Our experiences might be different, but those are very important and those matter because they define us as a person. But if you just sort of, peel away all of that, then what remains at the core? We are all Advaita Vedanta believes that we are all the same. We are all reflections of the same universal super force. Some folks might call it God. Some might say, the elusive force that modern physics has been trying to identify, which kind of regulates everything in the universe. Whatever way you look at it, that's what. So if we believe in this, then there's really no other. We are all the seeming differences in trajectories. We recognize that, but I'm same as you are just as me. So if that's the case, then that's the way I approach when I try to form my research partnerships or when I kind of try to teach in the classroom. The students are no different from me. Their trajectories are just different, and I'm as a facilitator or coach trying to help them or mentor them so that they can take up the next responsibilities. So now I want to focus on what has worked for me. I think the natural curiosity to think broad and take an interest in multiple disciplines well beyond my own specialty, but it's a double-edged sword. It requires a constant challenge of balancing eclecticism versus focus, and sometimes you lose out in terms of focus, which is why my PhD took longer to finish. I may not have published as many papers as I could have, because I took some high-risk projects that did not fructify or had to be pegged at lower quality journals, didn't get an A star because the idea was different or it was, something that we felt is important, but necessarily did not fulfill the journal's positioning or fit, things like that. it also reflects in things like when I go into the classroom, like when I'm doing my MFA right now, I'm going in as a student. I have done that for the MALS program, liberal studies, and also for MA. You have to leave your ego totally outside, because you're at the master's or doctoral seminar levels, and I'm a novice in those fields because what do I know about English literature? I have read it, but not as much as folks that have specialized in English from undergrad to graduate have done. So you have to necessarily open up yourself to a lot of critique, constructive critique, but it can be very humbling as well. So I think that in some ways it comes back into my own writing and my work on projects also. It's very easy for me to kind of when I'm approaching potential co-authors to recognize that they might be experts in the field and I might have to come almost as a novice and yet be able to bring my own expertise into the project. I have also constantly sought out potential research collaborators. I've done this very strategically because of the lack of the doctoral program, and therefore I don't have a steady stream of publications in association with my PhD students over time. So conferences, LinkedIn, if I identify useful, a good paper being published on LinkedIn that I feel is close to my area of interest, I will reach out to the LinkedIn person who has posted it and I'd say that, I loved the post you made. Could I get a copy of the paper? Or are there potential for just having a chat? Nothing specific. We may or may not collaborate, but I'd like to know more. Likewise, at conferences, I've done that. Some of these things don't happen right away, but they may happen like 1 year or 2 years or 3 years later. A lot of my collaborators have come about even after 3, 4, 5 years of the first time I reached out to them or met them. And as I said, I've been very upfront about my capabilities and expertise, what I can do and what I cannot do. So whenever we are thinking of a collaborative project, I tell them that, I won't be able to contribute anything about the empirical side at all. I will only be able to bring in a positioning and contribution and theoretical framing for the project if that is of interest to you. And of course, once you have done your empirical side, I can interpret the findings and write a compelling discussion section or we can write it jointly together. So most of the folks I've worked with, they have said that's what I want. We want, like we are very strong in the empirical side, but we want a stronger theory up in the front end of the paper, or we want a discussion section to tell a more coherent story. So I'm not claiming that I do these things really well. Otherwise, I would not have so many rejections over and over again as I keep having. But I'm trying. So how are we doing, Vishal, in terms of time? I still have a few more slides. Can I go for another 10 minutes?
Uh, Dave, if we can wrap it up in about 5 minutes, that
5 minutes.
allows us to then
Okay.
spend more time with Q&A.
Absolutely. So I wanted to highlight this. Billy Chapata is a Zimbabwean author who is based in Atlanta. And he says that don't be afraid of new beginnings. Don't shy away from new people, new energy, new surroundings. Embrace new chances and happiness. So, if you read it, it's very intriguing, this message that the first part is almost like asking us what we should do. And he's an author and poet, so it comes from from a creative writing perspective, I think, and how he has seen life. But he is kind of concluding by saying, embrace new chances at happiness. Like if you do all of these things, there's no way that you will be unhappy. You will find happiness. So I believe in that. Let me just quickly say a few things about the writing. I know I have to finish in 5 minutes, so I'll be very quick on this. But please schedule time for writing. Otherwise, projects just go into the backlog. So even if it's for 10, 15 minutes a day working on your dissertation, please schedule time. Some days you will be more productive than other days, but stick to it also. Proactively challenge your writing practice, like you will have competing deadlines, competing responsibilities. These will become even more so once you take up a faculty position. So you have to be able to juggle a lot of things along with teaching. Teaching is what we are paid to do, paid for in the university context. So we have to do that really well as well. So how you juggle your deadlines and that's where I think the collaboration factor comes in very much. I had thought of talking about design thinkers' mindset. I kind of wanted to pitch it in here because I'm a design thinker, but time is short, but I'll just quickly highlight. We go from convergent to divergent to convergent thinking. Think big, but then you have to focus and bring things to a point where it results in an output, right? We always, in design thinking, we go with yes and logic. Like, what are the possibilities? We don't say yes, but, because if we engage in a lot of yes, but, then we kind of cut down the possibilities. Creative confidence, this is the belief that you have the ability to do what you can do, even if the road is very hard. And then finally, focus on user is something we do in design thinking, but in our context, it would be like focusing on the publication outlets, the kind of fit with the journal, your paper, how to tune it to that so that the review process can be easier. I think I'm going to stop there, and we can get into questions. I'll
Thanks,
just
Dave. I know I can see you have more slides, but let me ask you let me ask you one question and then we'll move to Ebru's question. She has one, but let me ask you my first question.
absolutely.
When we started this, when we met for the first time on Monday in VSSER, I told them that they should not rush into collaborating with new people. You talked about how you have a network of collaborators from different parts of the world. Does that mean you've never had co-authors where you regretted co-authoring with them? How do you deal with the quality of co-authorships?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think your advice is very well taken, Vishal, for doctoral students who are sort of finishing off the PhD and will be sort of working through their career path of being an assistant professor and the kind of expectations that are laid out. I think in the early stages, it is really best to collaborate. To get papers out of your dissertation. So you're maintaining the collaboration with your advisor and working with him or her and getting those papers through the whole process of review. But at a later stage, I think branching off from that and forging, your identity as a scholar and collaborating with other folks who are involved, interested in the same topic is very important. So it kind of broadens over time. On Vishal's question of, is it possible that all collaborations will work out well, or can you burn your fingers in some of those? It has happened with me a couple of times. So if I have, worked with so many co-authors, only once or twice I have been frustrated by the nature of the collaboration, and they may have been frustrated with me as well. So I'm not saying that, it's only everything was good from my side and everything was bad from theirs. Who knows? Yeah, but I was kind of like one or two things that I did not like in those collaborations, which is when I gently pull myself away. And the earlier you can do that, is the better. And in that sense, if you have some rules of engagement worked out for the collaborators, like I tell them that, I will not be contributing to the empirical analysis and I will rely on you to do that. But I will go all out to read the literature and contribute to the theory building side of the paper. So knowing those sort of things, having those things worked out in upfront is very good. One or two occasions where I had, a couple of things that did not work out was because these co-authors, maybe they were under pressure, but they did not want to revise and revamp the paper before sending it to the next journal, which in my view is an absolute no-no. Like, because our network is small, and the same reviewers could be reviewing for the second journal or could be an editor at the second journal. If people have taken so much time and effort to write you review comments, I think it is absolutely incumbent on us to solidly try and understand that. Maybe we don't agree with some of those, but those that we agree with, we have to go all out and improve the paper before we send it out. Maybe those folks were running against time and they didn't do that. But a paper got circulated over 6, 7 journals and then only got published. I was happy that it got published, but after 2, 3 times of nudging, I kind of just let go and I said, ideally I should extricate myself out of this paper. But if that's not going to happen, let them run with it and then we will see, like where it goes. Thankfully, it got published in an A journal finally. So I was happy about that, but I just had discomfort with the process.
Wonderful, Dave. And so what I got from your answer was yes, there are going to be negative experiences. Part of that might be because we come with different styles of working, different sort of availability of time to work. And one of the advice I hear you give our participants is as you work through resubmissions after rejection, make sure you're listening to the comments, improving the paper, strengthening the paper before you resubmit.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vishal, for articulating it so well. So I just, in the context of the reviewers, I want to make a quick point, because I think it is very important. How you respond to reviewers' comments. I have seen in the case of several papers of mine, which were almost at the sort of, make or break kind of situation, uh, responding to reviewers, explaining what you've been able to do, mentioning why you have not been able to do certain things, and saying it in a very gracious way, and the power of the language in that and how you articulate that matters a lot. So just be very mindful of how you respond to reviewers also, because everyone understands that a paper will still have flaws even after it is published. But listening to the reviewers, thanking them for their time, explaining your own position, and doing it in a very humble, gracious ways, graceful way is very important, I think.
Thank you, Dave. And with that, we'll move to Ebru's question.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. My questions are actually two, if I may ask. The first one is, Professor Dutta, it was amazing to see the things you have done and to improve yourself, to grow yourself further. You are a lifelong learner. So how do you adjust your time and energy is my first question, because I admire it. And second one, if I may ask, there are technology development zones run by universities, at least in my country. So can they be considered as ecosystems for entrepreneurship? Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
thank you,
thank you,
Ebru.
Ebru, for asking the first question to Dave. I have been trying to figure out how he manages his time because I want to learn from that too. So, Dave, the spotlight is on you.
Yeah, no, I think it's not easy. I have to say that, uh, I guess it is all driven by your passion. So if you are passionate about something, you will always find time to do it. And by nature, I've been, my interests have diverged a lot, I've always been like that. So I kind of feel that there's so much in this life to know and learn, and so many amazing things are happening. So I just want to know more. So that's one. Second, I think in terms of uh, whether you have time available for that depends a lot on your family and in the context of your work on your co-authors, right? Because if you're collaborating with several people who are highly accomplished and are working in amazing ways, then you can rely on them that you are a co-author, and if you're very fortunate that you are part of the team and you have to contribute your part, but others are also doing the heavy lifting, so that helps. Family support also matters a lot. I have to say that I have my wife Jayashree and a daughter. We have a daughter Devaja. Uh, Devaja hasn't said anything about all these forays into things. The only thing she said, "Oh, so when I'm graduating, you are going to be graduating again from the same university," because she is a freshman at my university in the engineering department, and I'm enrolled in the MFA program. So we will probably graduate about the same time because I'll be doing it on a part-time basis. But a tremendous support in terms of, like on the home side from my wife Jayashree, but it's also reciprocal. I try to support her just as she supports me. So I think we are fortunate in the relationships that we have at home as well as with friends and collaborators. That is a significant part. But other than that, it's very hard though. A lot of time goes by, and I feel I have a constant tension in my mind. Should I be writing and thinking about another poem or revising a poem or collecting my book of poems, which I will submit then? Most likely it'll get rejected, but these are very prestigious prizes and I'm aiming for some of those. Or should I be contributing to the next ecosystems paper? So that tension always persists, and it's not easy to manage that.
And Dave, despite all this, you are also volunteering your time to the entrepreneurship division, to the Academy of Management. why do you serve, I guess?
Yeah. So partly I feel like I have benefited so much from interaction with senior scholars or participating in professional development workshops or writing workshops. It is definitely paying it forward, like giving back to the community. Uh, Second, I feel also that interesting research ideas will come in some of these meetings or in even in the informal chats at the academy when I'm talking to other folks. It's such a vibrant. Our entrepreneurship division is so vibrant, and so much work has been done by Vishal for that. So he's really expanded the offerings and the connections and all of that. So thank you, Vishal, for that. That is there, and partially also for friends like Vishal. Like if they ask me to do something, then I feel that it's my honor to do it. So I just say yes.
Thank you, Dave. And can you answer Ebru's second question too? Can
Oh, yeah. The second
technology
question was
zones?
about the incubators or university setups. Can they be considered as ecosystem? It is a very interesting question. There's a lot of literature building around that, actually, incubators as ecosystems. What are how are they different from regional entrepreneurial ecosystems, which are designated based on policy or government initiatives? Also, entrepreneur incubators as being a very important actor who kind of builds an ecosystem around it. So some work is beginning to happen in that. If you are interested, Ebru, I would say that you should definitely pursue that because some papers are yet to be written on that. There have been a few papers, but not much.
Thank you so much, dear Professor.
Thank you.
Riz, you are next.
Thank you, Professor Dave. Thank you, Professor Vishal. Thank you for this opportunity. On the ecosystem, I was just looking into, I'm based in the Middle East, and particularly like you mentioned, your interest in qualitative side. My only sort of a challenge, though I haven't started on the project yet, but I was trying to visualize one. We have a very fantastic ecosystem context in the region. I think, but seems to be certain mismatch in terms of ecosystem actors and the ecosystem context. So some little bit policy side of working, perhaps, assumption at this point of time. But going qualitative, like if I use the GEM data is pretty clear, quant is clear on things. But having those difficult conversations, and particularly when it is like, policy related or, intent related, any tips on how to design that project, please?
Yeah. So I guess that I would say the context is very rich and definitely, absolutely fantastic to explore. I know I'm working on another research project which is also based in the Middle East with a very accomplished scholar from there, and he has told me some of the richness of that context in terms of the coalitions that are formed, the overlaps between political actors and other you know very rich individuals, for instance, or some levels of ethnic groups, and all of that. I think it is worth studying. So if your question was about like in a qualitative study, how you go about it and how you would position it, I would say that despite the unique features of the Middle Eastern context, and I know I'm just summarizing everything as Middle East, there are the countries that are quite different from each other in that space as well. One thing that reviewers and editors would ask is like, how is this generalizable to the general entrepreneurial context, or ecosystem context? So you'd have to highlight and tease that out. Uh, and how is it adding to the theory in terms of what we already know about entrepreneurial ecosystems? If you just keep those two things in mind, that it has to contribute to theory and the richness of the context should give us findings that, if not totally generalizable for all countries, can be transferable for other developing countries. Or say, like if we are talking about a resource constrained ecosystem context, then we should be able to transfer the findings to, or take insights from the findings to another resource-constrained entrepreneurial ecosystem context. If you articulate these things clearly, and then you have a solid methodology in terms of how you gathered your data, why you stopped interviewing after 30 or 40, what level of saturation you achieved, and how did the patterns arrive, and how did you then combine them into insights, I think it'll be fine. So I would also suggest that take some exemplar papers that have been published in the entrepreneurial ecosystem context or the entrepreneurship context in general, and see for a qualitative methodology-based paper, how did they lay out the whole thing, going from research design all the way to the findings and the insights from that, and just follow that as a template. Then I think the process will be easier.
Many thanks,
Many
Professor Dave.
thanks.
Thank you very much.
I do see a couple of questions on
And Dave,
chat.
I'm going to ask them to ask on camera, but before we go there, I want to echo your advice about looking at exemplar papers. That was one advice I got in one of the AOM meetings at the beginning of my career. I forget who it was, but they said in a session like this in person, look for exemplar papers and then write your papers to follow the exemplar paper. And I cannot tell you how much that advice was helpful over the years. It took so much stress away from writing. And is that what you do, Dave?
Yes, I try to do that, but somehow I may not succeed every time, because in one of the last rejections that I got, which was from one of our top 2 journals in our field, the editor said, we like many of these things that you have in the paper, but we wish that you could have tightened the logic a little more and drawn even more from the theory that you have done. And please look at some exemplar papers that have been published using this theoretical framing as well as this method, and just pattern it after that, then it'll be much easier. So, we don't quite reach the goal, but I think we are trying to improve each day, But your advice is very well taken. Look for exemplar papers and read them repeatedly, multiple times, and make notes on the sides and say, what did I like about this paper? How well it has been laid out? A lot of people use the Joya method, right, for our qualitative papers on entrepreneurship research. It's one of the well-accepted techniques. But you will see Joya method being applied in different ways. Some papers do it in a very wonderful way with a lot of figures and drafts of how everything is flowing nicely, versus some papers just do a sketchy way of doing it. So there lies the difference.
And we were talking about Joya method in this session yesterday. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Carolina, I believe you are next.
Yes, I had to unmute. Thank you, Dr. Dutta, for this presentation. I'm sorry I came a little late today, but I really enjoyed some of the wise words that you were sharing with us. One of the questions that I have for you are related to your analysis of entrepreneurial ecosystems. I was checking your webpage a little bit in the university where you teach, and I see that you work with colleagues from Italy, from Canada, from the US, from India. But I am seeing kind of a pattern in terms of this way in which the tiger countries in Asia and nowadays China is developing this model of ecosystem for entrepreneurs that seems to differ significantly from the models of the West that we have seen more spontaneously being created. And I would like to hear from you what is your experience, maybe observing these differences. Are you observing maybe some type of a pattern between, I don't want to generalize, I don't like to do it, but I will use it just for the practicality of this conversation, West, East kind of models, and I would like to see what are your perceptions about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that question. It's very interesting. So I would say for entrepreneurial ecosystems, and that's the field I'm specializing in right now. So I really read all the research papers that come out in that field, and so much has been already published, and papers keep coming out. But one tacit assumption that still persists in ecosystems literature is that ventures and other ecosystem actors collaborate with each other in ecosystems, entrepreneurial ecosystem, because there is a win-win. And that inherently there's resource sharing, and the ecosystem is rich to able to provide a lot of resources that can be shared. Of course, they can come with conflicts, or some sort of misalignments can happen, but the resources are inherently there. And usually there's policy support also that is there, which is conducive to working like that. That's the tacit assumption. But many ecosystems across the world are not like that. They are highly resource constrained. They might have a lot of lack of policy, which could then reflect in institutional voids within those ecosystems. So many things that you expect in an ecosystem are not there. Then comes the question, are those functioning as ecosystems at all or not? Or is it like free for all and every venture is just doing the best they can for themselves? Or is it that the ventures and the other ecosystem actors are circumventing some of these gaps in the ecosystem or the lack of resources, and they're still able to, take certain other advantages of being together or co-located in a geography, and are able to, get more than what they would have otherwise done in terms of performance. So I think it's really worth studying those emerging ecosystems or resource-constrained ecosystems are worth studying. Then we can go to the next level in terms of building the literature in the ecosystems field. So I encourage you to do that.
Thank you, Doctor.
Wonderful. Mariam, did you have a question?
Yes, hello. Hello,
Hello.
Dr. Vishal. Hello, Dr. Dev.
Hi, Mariam.
I hope you're doing well, and I want to ask you two questions, if you may. For the first one, what are your advices to build a very great theoretical framework and conceptual framework? And in your opinion, do you think that we have to be based on two theories to build a great conceptual framework, or it is okay to work with a lot of theories, like it's more richer? So the last question, please. I'm more also into qualitative methodology, but for some cases, the people are not open to speak up for some subject. Do you advise to switch it to quantitative methodology or to change sample? That was my question.
Let's deal with the last question first. So you're saying that some of your respondents are not expressing themselves when you tried a qualitative method of data collection?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So first thing I would say is it's the research question that would guide you to whether you would want to go following a quantitative methodology route or a qualitative route. So that's kind of been decided based on the research question. So after that, if it's a field problem that you're facing, where people are not articulate enough, and that can happen for multiple reasons. Maybe some of the people are introvert, or maybe some of the culture of the place is such that it's people may not speak to strangers or to data collectors very easily, things like that. This is definitely a problem. So there's no easy solution to that. What I have seen works is I just generally whenever I've done data collection. These days, my co-authors usually do the qualitative data collection also. So I just concentrate on the theory part, as I told you. So I don't have too much of recent field experience of data gathering. But every time I've seen what really works very well is if you just come to the person as a person, not as an academic researcher trying to say that I know about this phenomenon and I'm trying to understand from you, because they will say, what's in it for me, for them, right? I mean, they are giving us data, but they may not getting anything. So it's much better to sort of, be very person oriented, try to build rapport that way. If you know the language a little bit, speak their language, explain maybe a little bit about your own trajectory, that you are trying to do the best you can as an academic, and this would be so important. Their thoughts would be so valuable. If you do like that, a lot of times people open up. I've seen that this works every time with my potential co-authors. I just speak to them as a person, and even if we don't have any common projects, sometime later, they might want us to collaborate again. And then coming to your previous question about theoretical frames, how many to use or not, I think it is best to concentrate and build your expertise in one or two theories, I think. But you should generally, if you are thinking of calling yourself a theorist, and that's the place where you are trying to contribute in a multi-author project, then you have to be abreast of several other theories also. Otherwise, people might say that what are you actually bringing? In case that specific theory is not being used, you should be able to quickly jump into another theory that seems more relevant and still be able to build a solid front end for the paper. Final question is about like how to position your research. I would say that read as many AMR papers as you can, read other theory papers in other journals, and please definitely read about the wonderful papers that have been written about, or no thought pieces that have been written about how to write a theory paper, what do AMR editors want, what do AMJ editors want. Read each one of those and read them again and again.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Dr. Dev. Thank you.
Dave, I want to echo what you said about sometimes it's best not to approach things as a researcher, but as a conversation. And I'll sort of reinforce that with an example. Currently, I'm working on a project about succession in family business, especially gender issues in succession. And for the qualitative part of the paper, when I told people I was going to talk to that I want to interview you, they shut up. They didn't want to talk. As soon as I pulled out, as soon as I sort of, back when we started in this field, we used to use like those audio recorders with little tapes, and I still sort of use that. As soon as I pulled that out, they didn't want to talk. And this was in the non-US context. I won't name the country, but in the non-US context. And they said, I don't want to be interviewed. And so I put it away. And I said, well, would you be willing to talk? And they said, well, if you just want to talk, sure, let me order some tea and we can talk over tea.
Right.
And that's what we did. And then when I left the conversation, I made notes based on my immediate recollection.
Yes.
And in the paper, we share that
That's
people
so
didn't want
amazing.
to be interviewed,
Yeah.
but people were willing to have a conversation one-to-one. Is that consistent with sort of
Oh,
what you were saying?
absolutely, absolutely. I think that works all the time. Like when we kind of go away from a transactional relationship toward something that is like sort of more, like at a high level of understanding and respect. I think it really works well. So yeah, Vishal, thank you for sharing that. I just see one question Zakia has mentioned there. So I don't know if you want to invite her to come on mic or.
Yeah, I have asked Zakia to ask you the question on camera. So Zakia, can you go ahead and ask?
Zakia, you're muted.
Sorry. First of all, thank you so much, Mr. Gupta, for this event and for all of the learning we are getting from this VCCR learning. And thank you, Professor Dutta, for this presentation. It was really, really interesting.
Thank you,
My
pleasure.
question is thank you. My question is about when you actually said that you built some sort of expertise in building theoretical frameworks, and you also happen to be a reviewer in so many journals and reviews. How do you, or what do you look up for when you actually examine papers and you look at the theoretical design of each paper? What do you look for to say that this paper is actually solid and you validate it? Thank
Right.
you.
Very good question. So I get some papers like that from potential co-authors where they say that, they have very interesting research context and they have collected amazing data, done some analysis, have some findings. They also have some kind of a theoretical framing in the beginning, but they feel that it could be strengthened further. So I get a paper like that, right? And they're asking me if I'd like to collaborate in that paper or not. So then I just go through what they have framed in terms of theory in the front end of the paper. And then I look at whether, you go from research question and theory to research design to methods and findings, and then sort of close the loop, bringing back in terms of like, did we answer the research question? How does our how do our findings add to the body of literature in that field, right? So if I see something is lacking in there, and therefore there is a potential for me to collaborate, in the initial meetings, I would ask them like, why did they bring that theory and what was their intent? Because I want to fully respect that they are the authors of the paper. I have not even started collaboration. And then we would have a lot of brainstorming meetings, and I would ask questions. They would give answers. They would say some things which would spark some thoughts in my mind. Then I would say that, okay, I need to look at it. Then if we kind of agree that this, say it is dynamic capabilities that we will use, right? Or institutional theory. We feel that that is the best one for this paper. And they began with that, or it needs to be strengthened. Or maybe they added one theory, but now we find that another theory might come in more handy. Then I really take a deep dive in the literature. I would read at 30 to 40 to 50 papers on institutional theory or dynamic capabilities theory, so that I feel very confident that, okay, we know what I'm going to be saying in the context of this paper is going to make sense. So that part of the work is totally mine. I do that because that's where I'm trying to contribute. And then we try to, like have a compelling framework and, go from there. So a lot of it gets changed during reviewer comment based on reviewer comments during review process. But I found that in qualitative studies, if after you arrive at your findings, if you are able to propose a theoretical framework, say based on Joya method, you come with certain insights about first order, second order, and then you sort of get a clearer understanding of the phenomenon. If you can put all of these together into a theoretical framework that can be depicted as a picture or as a set of boxes and arrows, that the reviewers seem to like a lot. And of course, that can also get changed. But if we didn't have that in a paper, then the chances of a qualitative paper being rejected was higher. That's all I would say based on my experience.
And
Thank
Dave,
you so much, Professor.
as you're working on these papers, I want to follow up on Zakia's question.
Yes, please.
How do you know the paper is ready now? How do you know the front end is ready, the back end is ready? How do you know that what you've developed is enough for you to try what level of journal? So there are two questions here, right? How do you know when you're ready? And how do you know what level of journal is this worth going?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So how do we know that it is ready? So, if the theoretical part of the paper, the front end of the paper has looked at, a good mix of literature, maybe cited about 30 papers, including very recent ones in the journal that we are, publishing, or seminal papers, then we feel that the front end is kind of done. If the middle part, they have done at least, minimum I would be thinking in case of a qualitative study would be at least 20 to 25 interviews. Ideally, it should be much more than that because top journals are asking for like 50 interviews or, interviews in two rounds, like stage one and stage two, sort of, longitudinal ways of going back to the same people and following up. So if all of that has been done and we've arrived at some interesting findings, then we feel that the paper is good from the findings and the methods point of view. And then we see the discussion section to see, does it contribute back to the literature where we drew from in terms of some contribution? And does it have some, we tend to not have too many practitioner contributions in papers, but at least, if you can say a few things and say them with a lot of confidence, then I feel that the paper is we feel that the paper is ready to be sent out. But a lot of times, even after doing all that, also the papers get rejected, so it's very hard, yeah. And they do get changed during the review process.
And is that normal? Getting rejected, changing the paper during the review process, does that still happen to you?
Yeah, it has happened to some extent, I would say. And then as a co-author team, then we kind of, have to make a decision like, should we relent a little bit in this at this point and let the paper be published, or should we just say that we don't agree with what the reviewers are suggesting? So that's where I think the way of how you draft responses to reviewers really matters. I think really, really matters. I have had some such critical comments that we could not resolve, or the paper would change significantly, or would involve a lot of new data collection, none of which we could do. And then, we were very worried if this paper will be rejected again. And then what do we do after that? Because then the door closes. I mean, this is like the third round, maybe, Then we have agreed, and mostly I help in doing that, try to draft really good responses to reviewers. Again, I'm not saying that you sort of, try to please them in a way or something, because that will show through, and the reviewers are professionals in their academics in their own right, and they will not like that at all. But it's just the approach of, thanking them for the ways in which they steered the paper through the 2-3 rounds, and what significant changes have been made in that already because of their insights. And then very humbly explaining, like, while we recognize a couple of things that we should do, unfortunately, we cannot do this in the paper, but we have expressed those as the limitations of the paper. And we have identified, connected them with avenues for future research. And then after that, you just hope for the best. But one other thing I would say really works also is, like, when you write the letter to the editor, and this is like an ongoing process of revision, third round or fourth round, you draw out the salient changes that you made based on the reviewer's comments and the editor's comments in the cover letter of the that you send out with the revision, and clearly articulate, saying that you had asked us to do these things, we have done these things. Like, you wanted us to do 10 more interviews, we have done 10 more interviews or 15 more interviews. You wanted us to look at this again, we have run this analysis through one more time. Explain those critical things, then they feel that, okay, they've tried to address the best they could. And everyone knows that all papers will have some flaws even after they get published, right from typos to more fundamental flaws. I've seen it in my own papers after publication.
And Dave, I know we asked you for 60 minutes of your time and we are at 70. Is it possible to take 2 more questions?
Certainly, we can take 2 more questions.
Perfect. Sanjay, you get the last audience question for the day, and then I'll ask my question.
Oh, and there's yet another question from Halil, I think, on chat.
That I've asked him for some more clarification.
Okay.
But Sanjay, go ahead.
Good evening, Professor Dev. I have a question regarding a paper we read today. It's about the human entrepreneurship, right? And my question is, the concept human entrepreneurship, when you designed the paper, it came beforehand or it came after data analysis?
Which paper are you talking about?
Dave, your paper on humane
Chronometer.
entrepreneurship.
Humane entrepreneurship.
In Journal of Small Business Management.
Oh, yeah. So, no, there was some talk about humane entrepreneurship even before that. Like, Ayman Tarbishi and others had already written a couple of papers, and I think they may have been published in JSBM itself. So that was there. I was again inducted into this paper after some work had already been done in it. Like, my co-authors had felt that the human side of entrepreneurship is important, and they felt that maybe religion also plays a role in that, and started gathering data from India, and they had found some interesting findings. So with that, I received the paper saying that this concept of human entrepreneurship, it is some authors have already started talking about it. We went about doing that and collected data and how human entrepreneurship may be influenced by the religious background of the people themselves, of the entrepreneurs. And these are the findings we got, how to try and strengthen it and send it to a good quality journal, So I came in, I tried to read up the literature on human entrepreneurship. I read up literature on entrepreneurship and religion, or faith and entrepreneurship. And then I looked at the findings that they had already got based on that. And then I just tried to, because the findings have already been arrived at, you cannot fundamentally change anything in the paper, right? Then it would be like fishing. We don't want to do that fishing expedition ever. So I just strengthened the front end of the paper, and I tried to, based on the interpretation of the findings, just try to add a little more to the discussion section.
Okay. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah,
wonderful. Halil, do you want to ask your question on camera?
Thank you, Professor Gupta. Thank you very much. This is a great free lunch, actually. Having graduated from International Relations, PhD, I am just working on a paper. Just got rejected with some comments, also a lot of comments, but rejected anyway. It is Turkey's electric vehicle production project. For that project, government provided a lot of support and supported to form a joint venture among private companies. They formed the joint venture and produced now the car. I don't know how can I absorb this entrepreneurship literature and utilize? I am aware of the literature now. Thanks for this program on context, for example, on fear of failure, etc. All can be somehow utilized. But do you have any specific suggestions? Or
Okay,
am I
yeah.
totally irrelevant?
Yeah, no, this is a very good question. So, are these firms that are forming joint ventures among themselves, are they entrepreneurial firms, or are they like a big firm and a small firm? What kind of joint ventures are being formed?
Actually, they are four of them are Turkey's biggest firms because this is a very big project.
Yeah.
And one partner in a joint venture is this Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think given that backdrop, because there are no young or smaller firms that are doing this, it's likely the biggest players that already have significant presence are now forming this kind in the context of electric vehicles. And then there's support from Chamber of Commerce. It would be hard to position this as an entrepreneurship kind of a paper or an entrepreneurial ecosystems paper. It could be a regular strategy paper. I think, it could be more like that these are large firms. There's a new technology and that they want to, work on, and they're forming JVs. But a lot of JVs and projects and mergers and acquisitions or joint ventures for technology have already been written. A lot of stuff have already been written in this context for large firms. So you'll have to identify what is the new thing that you are bringing into this, into this context. So if you are able to do that, then you can target and write a paper on it. So you have to read up the literature on the intersection of technology and strategic efforts of firms, specifically through joint ventures. And what do we know about that field? Once you read up the literature, then you will see what more you can contribute to that. Only other way I think that you might be able to target it, and Vishal will probably be able to say much better than me on this, is like if you feel that these firms adopted an entrepreneurial approach in forming these joint ventures because they were, prospecting or working on a technology that was not so much well tried out yet. So they wanted to do that, maybe entrepreneurial orientation. Vishal, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think corporate entrepreneurship could be an angle, but we would have to know more about the context and what kind of data is available. And the strategy division, as you pointed out, Dave, is very open to topics like this.
Yes.
And of course, they do many, many webinars now where they ask for people to join and talk about their research interest, and they explain how to publish in top strategy journals. In fact, I shared with Athena one such session that's coming up recently, and she can share it with the rest of the folks
Absolutely
on the call. So Dave, with that, we'll move to the last question of the day, if that's okay with you.
Much.
Absolutely. And is that the one from Reese, or his was more of a comment, I think?
No, my question is the last question, Dave.
Okay,
I always reserve the last question for myself.
You do. That's such a wonderful way to end this wonderful seminar.
And my question is, Dave, 2 decades of research, full professor, amazing accomplishments, scores of papers done. What's your one advice to PhD students, junior professors who are trying to make their name in this profession, trying to come up in the ranks today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that firstly, you are in this because, you really are passionate to pursue a PhD, right? And do research and teaching and building the next generation of, students and managers and forming these kind of amazing partnerships with other like-minded people, going to different places, conferences, and all of that. So you are certainly passionate about it. Otherwise, I don't think you would have got into this field. You also know that it's a very hard journey. It's not a cakewalk, that you can just come in and every time it'll work out in your favor. So I would just say that, life offers its challenges and its sort of accomplishments and satisfaction, moments of satisfaction. Every day I kind of thank my stars that we are in such a wonderful profession, and I cannot believe it that that we can continue to pursue knowledge and have these kind of discussions and chats, and like it kind of helps me to go into other fields, like I'm doing. As part of my MFA, I did a nonfiction and a fiction class this time. I had to participate and I did it for credit. And I had never written essays before, and these I had to be written. So I took it as a challenge. So just enjoy the ride, and be very thankful for everything that you have.
Thank you, Dev. On that note, much appreciation for your taking the time today to talk to us. And we hope to see you at another conference or at another meeting in the future. Is it okay if folks reach out to you by LinkedIn or email?
Yes, absolutely. I would be very happy. If we want to chat later with some more time at hand, or if I can answer any of your questions, I would love to do that. So please do connect with me on LinkedIn. And Vishal, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I so appreciate that we have so many people from around the world all having this amazing summer program session and talking about entrepreneurship research and how to hone and further build their scholarly qualities. It's such a fantastic thing.
Thank you, Dave, for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a nice weekend, and let's stay connected.
Guys, I'll be around for 10 minutes. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer. And if you want to just say goodbye at this time, that's fine too. Today is our 5th day of meeting. We will not be meeting now until sometime in August, but Athena will be sharing with you